Welcome to Biology Made Easy. Today we are in the process of answering the question why every individual of every species is different. In our last lesson, we answered the question of why every species is different. In this lesson, we will consider the types of differences, genetic variation, the types of variation. We will explain some terms like species. Species, we'll say, are organisms. They are similar, they can interbreed, and they will produce organisms that are like them and are fertile. The important one is fertile offspring. Some organisms can interbreed, but they cannot produce a fertile offspring. But once it's a species, they are similar and they interbreed to produce individuals that can also reproduce fertile offspring. So that's a species. Now, what about genotype? These are terms we need to understand before. So genotype is the genetic makeup of the organism or the genes in organisms. Well, I am an organism. I have genes that can make me roll my tongue. I have genes that give me this peculiar type of brown eyes. And so genotype talk about genes. So simply genes present in the organism. You can't see genes, but you can see the expression of a gene. For instance, I can roll my tongue. So I have genes for rolling tongue. But you can't see the genes, but you can see I roll my tongue. And the outward expression of a gene is what is called the phenotype. Outward expression or observable features of an organism. That's the phenotype. So the genes can be seen or felt or measured from the phenotype, the outward expression. For instance, as I have told you, if I have genes for tongue rolling, the genes are there, but you observe it from the phenotype. So the phenotype is a result of genes present. So I decide to represent that genes, these are genes, and this is gene A, B, C, gene D. The phenotype is as a result of the genes present, and if these are genes A, B, C, D, not only the genes present, but the interaction among the genes. There can be various genetic interactions. You can have dominance, co-dominance, epistasis. You can have a gene, small a here, interacting with this. You can have these two genes interacting. Various interactions go on among genes. So the phenotype is produced from the genes present, interaction among the genes, gene products. A gene, part of DNA, ceases to produce proteins. And proteins, enzymes are also proteins. So gene products are various proteins. So the phenotype, gene present, gene interaction, gene products that will be produced, the effect of enzyme on the genes, and then the effect of the environmental factors on the genes. The environmental factors can be internal environmental factors, internal temperatures, internal pHs, external factors as well, warmth, etc. They all go to affect genes to produce the phenotype. Good. So the phenotype, remember, can be measured. Genes cannot be measured. Now, you can see that the phenotype, there are differences in the phenotypes. For instance, tongue rolling, there are differences. Some can roll their tongue, as you can see, and some can't roll their tongue. So the differences in the phenotypes is what is called variation. It's the differences in characteristics or traits or phenotype, differences in the phenotype of the same species, and these differences are brought about by genes and the environment. Now, these differences, which we call variation. There are two major types. We have heritable variation, which is also known as genetic variation, and we have non-heritable variation, which is also known as environmental or acquired variation. Now, the heritable variation is a variation that can be passed on from parents to offspring because the variation is caused by genes and the environment. But you have genes and the environment bringing out a character, and yet it's the genes that are passed on. The environment will not be passed on. Example of such variation is eye color, blood groups, hair type, tongue rolling, eye shape. There are plenty of characteristics that are caused by genes. Non-heritable variation is caused solely by the environment. Diseases like onchocerciasis, you see the eyes, it cannot be passed on from parent to offspring. Various accidental problems, various nutrient problems, kwashiorkor and all that. Environmental is acquired. It can never be passed on to offspring. Now, let's look at the genetic variation again that is caused by genes and the environment. And we have to note carefully that many gene expressions are affected by the environment. We want to give an example of gene expressions that are affected by the environment, and one is the Himalayan rabbit. The fur of the Himalayan rabbit is white or black, determined by an allele or a gene that produces enzymes that produces melanin. So if I have an illustration and see this is a gene or allele, this gene or allele will produce enzymes. Genes produce proteins. Enzymes are proteins. This enzyme will cause melanin to be produced, and melanin is black pigment. But this gene or allele functions based on heat or temperature. So when the temperature is high, melanin will not be produced, and so that part of the body will be white. So you see that the rabbit, the extremities are black. Those are the parts that are exposed to coldness. The nose, the hair, the toes, the feet, they are exposed to coldness. And because those parts are exposed to coldness, the gene, because it's heat sensitive, that is environmental, where the body is cold, will cause more melanin to be produced to be black. You know, melanin is black, so it absorbs heat from the environment and keeps the animal cool. This same enzyme, which will cause plenty of melanin to be produced at the extremities, the enzyme will be less sensitive in parts of the body that are warm, and those parts will not have melanin produced, and so those parts will be white. The white part will radiate the heat. The black part will absorb heat, the same gene. So you see, many gene expressions is affected by the environment. And this Himalayan rabbit experiment was done where a pack of eyes was placed at a shaved part, and with time the hair grew and it was black, even though it was at the part of the body that is mainly white. Heat sensitive gene. Well, this is what time will allow us. In our next lesson, we will look at genetic variation and look at differences between continuous variation and discontinuous variation. Phenotypes or characteristics that show continuous variation in the population among the species, and phenotypes that show discontinuous variation. In that, we will look at polygenes, major genes, and look at fingerprints in a bit of a detail. So we'll meet in our next lesson. Have a good day. Kindly do subscribe and give us your likes. Thank you.